Firstly, I would like to just ask you to give some reflections of what have been said today, and I would like to start to ask our chair, Agneta.
Yes, well, it's evident that this is a new concept for us in Sweden. It's not a new concept for you. You've been working with it in the EU for a long time, and also in your own country. In the same time, several in this room is wondering, is this new actually, or is it something, not least you, Göran, that we have done for several years, or what is it? That is the main question here. And we have started to give you an answer, or several answers, but it is the word responsible, I think, is a very important word in this. It's responsible research, it's a responsible innovation. But to me, I think we have been touching another word, but we have not said it openly, and that is the word integrity. Responsible research is research with high integrity in order to serve our society in the best way. And if we say it so broadly, we also cover all fields of research, not just those fields we have been talking about today, who are fields that are more applicable.
So responsible research in basic research, that could be like open access, sharing results.
Yeah, could be. Openness, transparency are two words that have been mentioned here today, and I think those words are basic.
Thank you. Jeroen? Yeah, as a professor of moral philosophy, I couldn't agree more with this. That's absolutely true. From your presentation, I saw that this is evidence of what you're saying. In a sense, you have been doing pretty much what RI is about. It started, some years ago. Actually, you also took as your starting point, as you explained, the Lund Declaration, and many of the things that you had there, even the charts, were kind of pushing into that upper right and upper corner, and where you have high value in there. On the top, you had those red waves of the grand challenges. So I think we're all literally swimming in the same direction. I mean, we're trying to move to that place. And I think what is new, apart from the things the technical comments I've been making here, is that we are very much more explicit in what we're doing. We now we're helping ourselves to a vocabulary in which it becomes very clear. And then from there on, you can start to think about methodologies and tools, as the project indicates, tools and methodologies that help us to build supporting tools for engineers and in the research institutions to do this in a systematic way. To say, okay, your students come to me in my project or in my program, and they say, well, I've got this problem. How can we do this? How can we bring people together and try to move beyond just sitting in? There's nothing bad about sitting around the table and discussing. It's really valuable. But then you have to make the next step to the design requirements for your piece of software, for your new system, for your new infrastructure. So how do you go from that, remember the two yellow worlds I had, the world of ethics and the world of engineering. How do we, and of course PowerPoint is wonderful to draw all those arrows, but everywhere where you can point your finger there's a methodological problem. How can you move from one world? How do we translate moral values as we use them in the street, in the public debates, in the policy discourse among politicians? How do we translate them into really very specific packages of requirements that engineers can then design for? This sounds pretty easy, but it is very difficult, because the one who can do that bridges the world, the gap between two worlds, the world of technology and applied science and the world of ethics. And thus far we have been hopping over from one world to another. We had a very nice, good ethical discussion, and then we went on and carry off and do our work here. And there was not a connection between the two. If you can really step by step show how you move from your conception of what privacy is, or sustainability is, operationalize that in terms of requirements for your next product or service, then you have really achieved something. And that's exactly what this program is about. So becoming very explicit and articulate about it helps us to do a much better job and to be much more innovative.
Thank you. Göran?
Boy, there's a lot of reflections you can generate here. I think both that the word responsible is an important word here, but it's also quite demanding in a way, and we have all circled around, I think, what we actually imply by it. On the one hand, everyone wants to be sort of responsible and would certainly agree that that's important, but how do you actually facilitate processes where both researchers and entrepreneurs, innovators are generating things that are more sort of taking note of different aspects of what they are generating, taking responsibility. Making that happen in a very good way without sort of collapsing the whole process in moral, ethical stipulations by politicians or something, which would be probably very harmful, as I think some raised here, is a way of doing this in a wise way. I think innovation and research to a large extent are experimentation. Stepwise processes to develop things that are more valuable to certain to customers or to us as individuals, to the civil society which we want to buy into. And what we get is what we reward. So how the society, civil society, consumers, politicians are rewarding different kinds of activities would be what we get. So how this process is actually happening in our society, between the civil society and the consumers, are extremely important. Companies wouldn't do things that they don't get paid for. Public officials wouldn't do that either. Researchers wouldn't do research if they don't get funding for what they do and if they don't get to qualify as researchers. So I come back to incentives. You have to really understand the incentive structures of the people involved, and not think too easily that you can, command innovation. I don't think anyone has implied that, but it's very. You have to be very careful when you design the processes. Get the incentives right and generate the arenas where people meet through that. But they don't come. Even the civil society won't come if we don't reward them. So find those arenas. We have to design them.
Yeah.
Just a follow-up on this point. I agree about the social experimentation. And then responsibility implies that we think about designing the institutions or the environment, the boundary conditions that we put on this large social experimentations that we do. They're global experiments. So we have experimented in the past with nuclear, we have experimented with asbestos, we have so we know that things can go wrong as well. So we need to have acknowledging that innovation and creativity play a role, and that we cannot just guide it and just channel it through this small pipe. That cannot be done. So I agreed with that. But think about how to make. There's a beautiful book or a phrase by a political scientist that says how to make democracy safe for technology. Right? How can we design the institutions that allow us to carry on with these experiments, but within certain limits, and so with some checks and balances and monitoring in place. The other thing relates to your remark about incentives. I would be careful with that. I agree with you that we need to motivate people. People have a motivation. They have to feel the urge to do certain things, to do good research, to develop medicine and come up with wonderful things we've seen many examples of today that we all like to see happening. But we need to take on board results of economists who have recently, after the global financial crisis, have looked at some of the peculiarities of an economic model of man, right, where we incentivize people by rewarding them with financial, monetary, rewards. And so we say, you get more, you get money on the table, and we know from research that this could lead to crowding out. And crowding out is killing the intrinsic motivation that many people have, and especially in science, in academia. People want to do the right thing, not because their salary will go up. Of course, they need the tools and the people to do the work, but we have to be careful in incentivizing with these monetary external rewards, which will do away or crowd out, push out and we know that from, for example, from sustainability subsidies. When you start to subsidize the things that people want to do anyway, right? You kill that. Actually, we have wonderful examples. And so the famous example is, very briefly, is the Haifa daycare center experiment. So people are picking their children too late up from daycare. And and you want to end this. It's getting worse and worse and worse. You say, well, okay, let's find those people. The study that reports on this is a fine is a price. Because once you've introduced the monetary punishment, the problem only gets worse. Because people think, I can afford to pay 10 euros if I'm running half an hour late. Right? People are glad to get rid of the feelings of guilt because they're too late. It's the irresponsible thing to do. So if you introduce financial and external punishments or rewards, you may kill the thing that you're after. I'm not saying that it doesn't work everywhere, but you have to apply it very carefully.
Thank you.
So, what are your opinions about implementing RRI in Sweden? Are there any particular big challenges to tackle, or are the chances good? What are your reflections?
Do you want me to start? Well, it's apparent that this is a new concept for Sweden, even though a lot of in those things that does make this concept isn't new for us. But I think it's not just about to having tools for researchers, organizations and others in order to introduce RRI in Sweden. I think we have to discuss the concept. What is responsible research? And that is also, I think, something for Vetenskapen allmänhet to tackle. And some of the tools could also be our attitudes. Our attitudes as researchers. Are we open to the society around us? Are we open to start a discussion with somebody about our research field? That is also something, and that could also be some kind of tool. It must not be just hands-on tools, but take it a bit broader, and a broader discussion about the concept. I would advise that, because Swedes and no other citizens in Europe either, they don't just take a concept and make it their own. They have to criticize it, discuss it, and after a while you perhaps have 80% of that concept in their bodies in one way or the other. But, it will take some time.
Take some time to get it integrated into society and different groups. Yeah.
As a concept.
As a concept, yeah.
Not to talk about responsible research or responsible innovation, not at all.
Yeah.
Well, without being stick too much to the wordings we have used here, I think Sweden has extremely good potential in comparison to many other countries, because we have a good civil society, well developed in several respects, a democratic system that actually works. even a bureaucracy that is comparably really advanced, good industry, entrepreneurship, innovative youth, and all those kinds of things. So whatever we mean by it, but if we mean that something that actually generates much more valuable solutions, which also drive business, I think we have really good potential. But then you will have to design things. I would just like to come back to two things. First, I think it is a misunderstanding and the flattening of the concept of incentives. What we actually could change the word there too, but then to talk about what motivates people. But what motivates people is often money term, pecuniary rewards in some sense, but not always. Of course, not always. But we have to look at every one of us are facing different incentive structures. Why you do what you do has a relationship to certain things that motivates you, and me too. And the business firm, a lot of things, but primarily if it could sell their products or services. A researcher, if you could publish different kinds of articles that gets you, a kind of a career, but sometimes also, and increasingly so, to be able to contribute also to some things called innovation outside of the university or something like that. So it's not simply pecuniary incentives, which is coming from this financial discussion. But if you don't do certain things that cost a lot for certain people to come to a meeting, to actually start projects together, which generally cost some money also for somebody, you could not facilitate those processes which we are actually talking about here. So changing the incentive structure or changing the motivation structure in some way, but we generally don't understand or look at what is actually driving them. Another thing which came up in the discussion was not picked up, I think, is how we facilitate visioning. From the civil society, I don't remember the name, but she brought it up, that our visioning processes are generally very, very not so well advanced. Where do we bring in the big thoughts? And how do you facilitate processes where big thoughts are actually brought to the table? Is very important. Otherwise, the innovation process would end up in the lower hand right corner, which is the usual. You do the incremental stuff. And visions are important, otherwise you won't get to those things. So how do you facilitate those? Well, it also has to do with incentive structures, because people don't think out of the box just like that. Or they may think about it, but at home. So I come back to that. Incentive structures.
Thank you very much. I think Jeroen has something to say about that.
I have a lot to say to this, but
do you have
we'll do that during the drinks. But final remark about Sweden, and I completely concur with what you said. I think you're in as many of the Western Nordic European countries are in a wonderful shape. I was having a discussion with someone there over big data, and so how can we reap all the benefits and all the innovations that are in this area. Many countries are struggling with that. Why? Because it's low trust societies. People don't trust their government, they don't trust their businesses with these data, and they don't believe that they will do anything good with it. If you're on all the good lists, like Sweden and the Netherlands and Finland and Denmark are, high transparency, high quality institutions, high levels of trust, high levels of happiness, kind of low inequality. That is the ideal. Read the book by Acemoglu and Robinson, Why Nations Fail. Why they fail is a chapter on institutions. The quality of your institutions determines whether you will be successful. And so these institutions, the quality of those institutions also determine what kind of people you will be educating, and these are probably the persons that are likely to have those grand ideas that will drive us up to the right in the corner.
Thank you very much. This was a very interesting and enjoyable discussion about the future of RRI, and we would like to give you some flowers and presents.
Thank you very much, and a special thank you to Jeroen van den Hoven, our keynote speaker. Thank you very much for your contribution to this conference.